Afternoon,
Oh,
everybody.
wait, go ahead and wait, Marcia. We're going to wait till
Sorry.
folks join us first, and then I'll take a
Okay.
slide now.
Tell me, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Marsha Smith. I'm the president of Firelight Media. I'm a Black woman with a kind of wedge-shaped afro, white shirt, and clear glasses against a background with a fireplace in the background. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar, which will be quick and dirty, will focus on the City Artist Corps Grants Program for New York City-based artists, including filmmakers. Today's event will include brief introductions by presenting partners, followed by an overview of the City Artist Corps Grants Program. We have about 20 minutes at the end of the event for your questions, so please feel free at any time to submit questions via the Q&A window in the Zoom or via the chat at any time. And thank you to our captioner, Shirley Ha, for interpretation services. Firelight Media is among the organizations that are partnering with this on the City Artist Corps Grants Initiative, which is led by the New York City Foundation for the Arts, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and the Queen's Theater. It is very important to note, and this is really the reason we're hosting the webinar today, is that the City Artist Corps Grant Program is open to all New York City-based working artists in any discipline. In today's webinar, we're focusing on filmmakers of color in particular. We at Firelight and our colleagues at Black Public Media have seen and experienced the damaging impact that COVID-19 has had on the city's predominantly BIPOC communities and artists, which is why we are hosting this webinar today. We want to make sure that the BIPOC filmmaker community in particular is aware of the availability of these funds and is prepared to apply to get them. Just to say a word about Firelight Media, Firelight is a premier destination for nonfiction cinema by and about communities of color. Firelight produces documentary films, supports emerging filmmakers of color, and cultivates audiences for their work. Our programs include the Documentary Lab, which is an 18-month fellowship supporting emerging filmmakers, the Groundwork Regional Lab, which supports filmmakers, emerging filmmakers in the American South, Midwest, and US territories, and the William Greaves Fund, which is a development grant-making program for mid-career BIPOC filmmakers. We also develop strategies, partnerships, and materials to reach and engage diverse audiences and maximize the impact of documentary films. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Leslie Fields-Cruz, who is Executive Director of Black Public Media. Leslie, as I said, is the Executive Director of BPM. Under her leadership, Black Public Media has cultivated new partnerships and initiated vital new programs, such as the 360 Incubator, Pitch Black Forum, BPM Plus, and Black Media Story Summit, all of which support Black talent and content development. In February, Leslie made Crain's New York's 2021 list of notable Black business leaders. Congratulations, Leslie. She currently serves on the board of directors for New York Women in Film and Television and on the board of the New Era Creative Space. Leslie, turning it over to you.
Thank you, Marcia. Hi, everyone. I am going to keep my remarks quick. I'm Leslie Fields-Cruz. My pronouns are she, her, her. I'm actually wearing a black t-shirt that has some writing. I'm up here sporting my colleagues at the Center for Asian American Media because today's session is about all BIPOC media makers. And I also want to make a shout out to those of you who are working in emerging media. This City Artist Core Fund is for you as well. So stay on, listen to this information and use it because those of you working in emerging media, you have that opportunity. Black Public Media is formerly known as the National Black Programming Consortium. We develop, produce, fund, and distribute media content about the African American and global Black experience. Our mission is to commit to a fully realized expression of democracy, and we accomplish this by supporting diverse voices through our training, education, and investment in visionary content makers. For more than 40 years, yes, we are over 40 years old, Black Public Media has addressed the needs of unserved and underserved audiences, and we continue to address historical, contemporary, and systemic challenges that traditionally impede the development and distribution of Black stories. And with that, I know you guys really want to hear about this grant program from the city. I'm going to pass it on to Michon Boston, who's with Firelight Media. Michon is the founder and principal of Michon Boston Group Limited, providing consulting and strategic planning to film, media makers, and organizations on impact campaigns to reach and inspire their target audiences. Michon has worked in television programming for PBS and was director of programming for DC Humanities, an affiliate of the National Endowment of the Humanities. She's also a freelance journalist and a published, produced playwright. Michon's articles are published in the New York Times, Washington City Paper, and the Washington Post magazine. Michon, take it.
Thank you, Leslie. Good afternoon, everyone. As Leslie says, I am Michon Boston, project manager for Firelight Media's partnership with the City Artists Core Grants. I am an African-American woman with brown skin, what I describe the color of cinnamon, with dark shoulder-length hair. I have dark eyes, and I'm wearing rectangular dark glasses. My background is powder blue. It's beautiful, with the Black Public Media B logos and the Firelight Eye fire eye and the Firelight logo, changing the story behind me. So I'm going to give you an overview of the grant process and the application process today. And after that overview, we will take Q&As, and Cheryl Fields of Black Public Media will join me to take your questions that are specific to filmmaker artists and media makers, So I'm looking forward to hearing your questions about applying for the grant and any ideas or things you wish to share during this webinar. But before we do that, I just want to remind you that the webinar is being recorded to post on Firelight's YouTube channel. We have live closed captions, so see the bottom of your screen. If you require closed captions, go to the bottom of your screen. You should see a CC logo. If you are on a mobile device, look for more. There are probably 3 dots under it, and open that window, pop open that window, and you should see the closed caption button so you can access it if you are on something like a tablet, iPad, or iPhone, or other kind of smartphone mobile device. Also, we'll make a PDF copy of the PowerPoint slide available to registrants. There will be more information. We just tried to make it not so text heavy for this presentation, and we'll get that to you after the webinar. Before we begin, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize where we are right now and whose lands we were on. We are all on the ancestral lands of Native Americans, and we acknowledge the Native communities, vibrant and diverse, that were here before us, are with us now, and will be with us in the future, and what a vibrant future it will be. I am in Washington, D.C., and we call this the DMV. That's D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. That's the region. And here I acknowledge, and we acknowledge, the Native communities along the 3 rivers we know today as Anacostia, Potomac, and Chesapeake. These Native communities include the Pamunkey tribe, the Nacotchtank, the Doe-Toxinant, and the Piscataway. Take this time now to use the chat. If you know the names of the Native American communities where you are now, you can type them into the chat so that we all may recognize and acknowledge them. So let us begin. What are the City Artist Corps grants? They are part of City Artist Corps, a new $25 million recovery initiative designed to help artists like yourselves who were both hard hit by the pandemic and who may have been left out of other local and federal funding opportunities. The City Artist Grants are intended to support New York City-based working artists who have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Artists working in any discipline, including filmmaking, are eligible to apply. Next slide. So these are our partners. The lead partners are to the left, New York Foundation for the Arts, New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, with support from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment and Queens Theater. On the right are the partners, the organizations such as such as Firelight Media, Black Public Media, and you may see some other organizations that you recognize on the right of the screen. You can see I have public television programming in my blood. So let's talk about the grant awards. Over 3,000 artists will receive a one-time $5,000 grant. Those funds will be distributed in 2 installments. The first installment will be $4,000 upon selection. The second installment will be $1,000 after completion of a final report that should be submitted no later than November 12, 2021. Next slide. These are important dates, key dates. We have already, the grant cycle for the first grant cycle is now closed. That closed on June 22nd. We are now in cycle 2. The application is online and that will open up on Tuesday, July 6th at 10 a.m. for cycle 2 and then close on July 20th at 10 a.m. Recipients of the grants will be notified Monday, August 2nd. And part of the grant requirement is that you present a public engagement activity that's free to the public For cycle 2, it should occur between the dates starting from August 20th to October 31st, 2021. The third and final cycle opens up on Tuesday, July 27th at 10 a.m. It closes Tuesday, August 10th at 10 a.m. Recipients will be notified Wednesday, August 25th, and the engagement activities would occur from September 3rd through October 31st, 2021. Bottom line is all the creative public engagement activities must be completed by Sunday, October 31st, 2021. If you have already applied for cycle 1 and you have not been notified that you have received funding or that your application may have been ineligible, they will invite you to reapply again. And if your application is eligible, but you didn't receive funding, you will automatically be moved into cycle 2. So you do not have to create or enter another application. We'll talk about that more later. Next slide. Who can apply? You must be a current resident of New York City in its 5 boroughs and maintain residency since January 2020. Artists practicing in any creative discipline who can provide documentation of their creative practice from any time in the past 2 years, that's 2019 and or 2020. Past NYFA grant recipients, including 2020, 2021 COVID-19 emergency grants, can apply. Next slide. These are some of the things that you should have documented proof or collect for the application. You must have a social security number or individual taxpayer identification number or EIN after the selection to receive the grant monies. Applicants must be 21 years or older on or before June 8, 2021. Also, a family member, friend, or a support person may apply on behalf of an artist who is unable to complete the application on their own. Next slide. Who is ineligible? If you are enrolled in a degree-seeking program, BFA, MFA, MA, etc., students are not eligible to apply for the grant. Employees of NYFA, the City of New York, or any of the partnering organizations you saw on the partner list supporting the City Artist Corps grants programs are ineligible. Artists who have already received one City Artist Corps grant cannot reapply for additional grants in subsequent cycles. Also, arts workers such as stage managers, arts handlers, curators, and other arts works cultural workers are ineligible for the grant funds. Next slide. So for the application, here are some things you must provide. Documentation of a current sustained artistic practice, such as a CV or a resume, and it should be up to date. Or, it's one of the following, or a short artist biography up to 300 words. And include one of the following, an example of a recent creative public engagement, and that can include announcements. Also, recent work samples created within the last 2 years, 2019 to date, or a reference letter from someone who knows you, knows your work from 3 years, and be sure that the letter includes an email address and a phone number so that they can be contacted for any additional follow-up. Next slide. Also, for the application, you must provide an outline of City Artist Corps grants creative public engagement. What is the public engagement? Also, the proposed engagement date, promotion strategy for your public engagement. Please be advised that the selection process is not dependent on the depth or grandness of the project. They just want to know what it is. You also will have to answer a series of multi-choice questions identifying creative engagement location, estimated number of artists to be engaged, and type of engagement. And just as a note, the creative public engagement must happen in New York City within its 5 boroughs. Next slide. Applicants must also provide, of course, documentation of New York City residency. Applicants will need to submit the official documentation confirming residency from October, November, or December 2020. Let me repeat that. Official documentation confirming New York City residency from October, November, or December 2020. That could be ID NYC. That can be a utility bill. There are other forms of proof of New York residency that's available in some of the information on the NYFA website for the grants. You also need to provide proof of age, which means a passport or state-issued ID, including ID NYC. Next slide. Your proposed engagement activity. So it must have an arts or creative focus. It must be presented live and in person, but there is an exception. For artists who have a disability or are immunosuppressive, for whom it would be unsafe to engage in live in-person performances and activities, those artists are welcome to apply for a living or live digital creative engagement activity. I'll repeat that. There's an exception for artists with a disability or are immunosuppressive, for whom it would be unsafe to engage in live in-person performances, activities. They are welcome to apply for a live digital creative engagement activity. The live activities must occur in New York City, any of the 5 boroughs, as I mentioned. It must be free to the public. Ticketed programs are eligible, but all tickets must be free, and it can occur indoors or outdoors. Next slide. Artists can present more than one activity, but you can only receive one $5,000 grant. Artists can also choose to partner with a venue or present on your own. The activity must be documented with a minimum 2 photographs taken during the activity as it's happening. And creative engagements do not need to feature new work. Next slide. So let's give some examples of eligible engagement activities. Filmmakers, of course, a public screening, or a filmmaking workshop, an art exhibition. Some of you are film artists, do visual arts, or some kind of multi-performance pieces, a live art making experience, an already established or recurring creatively focused program. An example of that is you may have a film that's part of a festival that's already scheduled for the summer in New York City. So that would be an example of an established or recurring creatively focused program. Next slide. So these are the links to apply with the application form, application guidelines, and FAQs, frequently asked questions. We're going to provide a copy of this PDF or this slideshow to all persons who registered for this webinar event that has this page and more information. And as we mentioned before, we want you to type your questions in the Q&A queue on this Zoom platform or in the chat. And at the next slide, I would like to invite Cheryl Fields of Black Public Media to join me in answering the questions that you have submitted. And thank you very much. Cheryl, how are you?
Great. I'm great, Michon. Thank you. You did a great job with the presentation. And I'm sorry I couldn't get my background slide together, so hopefully this isn't too distracting for anyone.
It looks good. We're all blue. We're all blues. We got
I
the
know we're all blue
blues.
today. It's all good.
The happy blues.
In the happy blue,
blues.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Okay,
we're eager to hear your questions.
Yes, Patty, I think how are we going to do this?
I know someone did ask a question. I saw it pop up in the chat while you were speaking about venues. And I think the question was just try to give some more detail about venues. And the good news about this is that there is going to be a list of venues that people can potentially use, but the grantees are capable, have the capacity to do these things in any open space, except places where you would need a permit. So for example, there is going to be a process for permits. You can still select to do your presentation or your engagement event at a park, but you will have to participate in getting a permit. And the permit process is not, it's not as swift as we would like for it to be, but I think they're trying to turn it around in a fairly expedited period of time. But if you want to do your engagement on a sidewalk, if you want to do your engagement in a subway, if you want to do it in any event, any venue like that, there really is no requirement when you submit your application. You don't necessarily have to anticipate that there will be an odious permitting process. Also, if you don't know yet where you're going to do your engagement, you can still go ahead and apply and just say that you're going to figure that out. We don't want people not having a location selected to feel that that's a barrier to application. So hopefully that answers that person's question.
Can I just jump in here for a second, Cheryl and Michon? I just want to make sure, because it wasn't intuitive for me, that filmmakers can do anything.
Yes.
That is, for most of us, when we think engagement, we're thinking a film screening, and you certainly can do a film screening. As long as it's public, you can do it. That means you could do it at your local library, in a church basement, in a community room. As long as it's open to the public, you can do a screening. But you can also do other things and meet the threshold for engagement. So maybe you two can give some other ideas on what filmmakers can do that are not screenings.
Well, I mean, I think, go ahead, Michon.
Well, the other thing is pooling your grant monies together. If you have several people who receive the grant funds, that's one way of coming together. And you could do something where, for example, if you know someone who's choreographer says, I want to do a dance thing, and then you say, well, I'll provide this background. That's a video. Or somebody says, I want to recite spoken word poetry as part of it. I mean, there's so many ways filmmakers can plug in, not just into screenings, but to performing arts as well. And
if I can add, you can also do lectures. You can do a conversation about your film where you don't have to do a screening. You can do a workshop where you teach people how to use a camera, or you teach people about storytelling. You can have a community conversation, perhaps, about the topic that your film addresses. So it really is, I mean, the sky is the limit. And I would say if you have any questions about your idea, then certainly reach out. There is going to be a technical assistance link included, I think, in yeah. I'm looking here to see. There will be some technical support. So if you have any questions about your idea, it will be easy for you to get some assistance with that. But I would say, be creative, and also recognize that this does not have to, and I think Michon already said this, but your engagement does not have to involve a new piece of work. And it also can be an existing engagement that you already planned, but you would now like to attach it to this particular granting opportunity. So if you've already got something planned that's going to happen between now and October 31st, then go ahead and put your application together mentioning that engagement opportunity, and you could potentially be eligible to get this grant.
Cheryl, I see a question about, speaking of something that's already scheduled. What about a project that is already up, but is a continuation? You know,
I think since the requirements do not require new work, I think, you know, if you wanted to add a little twist to that, you could. But my understanding is that this grant, remember, the purpose of this is really to give filmmakers access to some resources that they may not have had, and to help to assuage some of the discomfort that everybody has felt because of the pandemic. So if you've been able to plan something and it's already up and running, go ahead and apply and see if the grant could potentially come your way. The way this is going to work is once you meet the eligibility criteria, you will be entered into what is essentially a lottery, and people will be selected on a more random basis. So I would encourage you, if you have an idea, just go ahead and put it together and put your application in.
yes. I think the bottom line here is that focus on just getting the application in.
Exactly.
It's not that I think who wrote that, it's not as onerous as
As many other applications.
as many other applications. This is not a National Endowment for the Arts application. It's really quite simple. And by the way, it's in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese, I believe, are the other 2 right now.
And if you know of someone, or you yourself would like to submit an application, but you're not comfortable submitting your application in one of those languages, there is also some language support. So don't let the fact that you can't complete your application in any of those 4 languages be an obstacle to you applying for this opportunity. Someone had asked a question about being able to use an amphitheater. Patty, can you pull that back up and ask us that question?
Right,
again?
the parks yes, the parks permit. Yeah, that is a process, I would
Yeah,
say.
there is a process for those kinds of venues. And as I said, if you're going to do it in an amphitheater, you just need to make sure you give yourself enough lead time to have your engagement completed by October 31st.
Yeah, there's a 21-day, I understand there's a 21-day wait period for a park permit.
Right.
So keep that in mind as well. Are there other questions that were in the chat?
I can help out here a little bit. There's a question here from Moses Akemta. If there's a screening, is there an established for the time limit that the screening has to be?
No.
All right, great. And then a question here is, did you see the one about the amphitheater? We had hoped to use the amphitheater at a city park to show our film, but there's so much info on the city parks website that permitting seems daunting. Where can we find more streamlined info about parks permits?
One of our working groups, we have working groups as part of our partnership, and there's one that's devoted to licensing and permitting.
And permitting,
so
right.
They're working on a sheet to streamline this so I'm going to type my email in the chat, and when that's ready, just let me know. Just let me know. I'll let you know. Just send me an email and I will send that to you when it's ready.
I'm going to go ahead and reshare that because that only went to panelists. There was another question up here about, let's see here. I noticed that there was some language about selection via lottery selection. Can you speak about that or give some clarification?
Yes, I mentioned that. So as I said, once your application comes in, the first screening will be for eligibility. And once you pass that screening, then your application will go on, and it will be added to a group of all the other applications that have been deemed eligible. And then there is a process by which filmmakers will, or anybody who applies, because this opportunity is not just for filmmakers, but what we're striving for is some equity and also representation across artistic disciplines. So we fully anticipate that there will be probably many, many more performing artists than filmmakers who apply for this opportunity. However, we are the team is determined to make sure that filmmakers get equitable representation. So I would say if you are interested in potentially getting this opportunity, just go ahead and apply. There are now 2 rounds left. The process will be the same for each round. However, the 3rd round is specifically focused on making sure that equity is a part of what the overall grant situation is. So I think you have, you know, maybe even a better chance than someone who is not a filmmaker who might be trying to get this, but that's how the lottery will work.
I mean, like all lotteries, the people who have the least chance of not getting a grant are the ones who don't apply.
Another question here from the Q&A function. Can you apply for a grant for different artistic endeavors as an artist? For example, poetry reading and then another for film screening.
Yes. You can apply as many times as you wish. However, if you are selected for a grant, that's the end of it. You get your grant and you cannot apply again. You're not eligible for any further grants. This is a one-shot opportunity. If you get the grant, then you are a grantee and you go do your event, but you cannot expect to, you will be taken out of the running for any subsequent grants in this particular grant program.
And let me add, if you're doing 2 events, you can apply with multiple events.
Right.
So you can put in one application and then in your public engagement activity, describe the event or events that you want to present.
And I also think Michon mentioned earlier that if you are wanting to partner with another artist, whether it's another filmmaker or perhaps it's a spoken word artist or a visual artist, and you all want to apply, you can create an event, an engagement opportunity that all of you would submit your application for, and each of you could potentially be selected for the grant, in which case each of you would get the $5,000 grant, and then you would only have to use whatever it takes to put the event up, and the rest of it you would basically pocket.
Other questions that we have here. This is a follow-up from Jordan. So we should just apply and they verify our eligibility, but then will they be asking us later for more information about our event?
The only information, if you receive a grant, the only information they will be asking for are the 2 photos and the final report. Otherwise, your application is either eligible, meaning you've submitted all the pertinent information, all the information they asked for, that the application asked for, or it's ineligible, meaning something like you're not a New York City resident, or you're not an artist, working artist. So things like that, very basic things. Otherwise, it's, as we've mentioned before, it's on a lottery system. So fill in the application and just get all the asks of the application in there, and you're good to go.
And the other thing, this didn't get asked, but I know if I were on the receiving end of this webinar, I would want to know what is the payment schedule. And what we have been told is that once you are selected as a grantee, your first payment will be $4,000, and the balance, which is $1,000, will come after you have staged or hosted your engagement. So you would get the bulk of your money up front, and the last $1,000 would come at the end.
And I will give this tip. I know I was talking about the cycles. This is a tip. Flexibility around the public engagement activity is a good thing, because let's just say you applied for cycle 1 and you didn't get the grant, but you're still eligible. That application that you submitted is going to go automatically into cycle 2 as long as that public engagement activity date is flexible. The same thing is the same with if you didn't get the grant, receive a grant for cycle 2. It's still, your application is still active. And as long as that engagement date is flexible, as long as it occurs by October 31st, 2021, your application will be put into cycle 3. So that's how they're going to roll over, but it's going to be based on making sure that it's eligible, meaning you've completed all the information and it meets all the criteria for the grant, and that your public engagement activity occurs at a time when the grants are being given out. So those dates about the cycles, when to apply, when the opening, the closing, and when the grant monies will be awarded are very important. And that's why we'll have the PDF. We'll send the PDF, this PDF version of today's slideshow to everyone who registered today. So you'll have that. And also the links that are in the chat, the application guidelines, all that information is there as well on the NYFA website.
I saw a question come up about whether or not it had to be a film or whether it could be a video or a television show. Any media production, whether it's a film, a video, I believe it could even be a podcast, is eligible for this particular thing, as long as you have an engagement. You know, you cannot submit the grant to seek funding necessarily for your film. It's the engagement that has to be what you're applying for.
And it has, unless you meet that exception for the kind of public event, meaning
it has to be, right?
The exception is if you have, if the applicant has a disability or immunosuppressive condition, that it would be unsafe to present a live event. All events must be live.
Also, Leslie, thank you for bringing this up. She just wanted to clarify that the final payment, the final $1,000, will be sent after you submit your final report. So everyone who gets the grant will be required to fulfill and submit a final report, and that's when the $1,000 will be sent.
Now I see a question, can the grant be used for a larger project, or does the project have to reflect the totality of the grant? A larger project, as long as there is a public engagement activity that is free and open to the public, you can apply. It's eligible. The key is that the activity has to be public, it has to be free, and it has to be live, indoors or outdoors.
And it has to take place before October 31st. Oh, there was a question about 2 locations. I didn't see that. Patty, can you read that back?
I can read it for you. So if you wish to present at 2 locations, which location should be stated?
Both, as long as they're within the 5 boroughs of New York City.
Great. All right. The other questions that we have here, I know we're kind of coming on the end here. Will we be notified if we are deemed eligible or ineligible?
The notification dates for cycle 2 will be August 2nd. The notification for cycle 3 will be August 25th. Now, NYFA says, this pertains to the 2nd cycle. If your application is eligible, but it didn't receive funding in the lottery, you don't have to reapply. Your application is still active. So it's going to automatically go into cycle 3. If it is ineligible, meaning there's something missing, or there's something there that needs to be corrected, applicants will receive notification from NYFA to submit a new application.
And long of short of it is you will hear something. If you don't hear anything past August 25th, it means that you have not been selected for a grant.
A question here, could we apply to create an additional screening as part of an existing film festival? Would that kind of organization be acceptable as a partner?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Can you read that again?
Sure.
This is Leslie. I understand what he's trying to say. And the answer is yes, if you are working with a film festival and it's scheduled, they're screening your film, you just need to work out with them as long as one of those sessions, one of those screenings are free and open to the public, then you can make that work. And you could ask them to set up a second screening. So it is possible, and that will work as well.
The person also asked, though, that I guess they were discouraged because the application asks for a zip code. The engagement has to take place in one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. It cannot be somewhere else.
There's also a question about what information are they asking for in the final report. To our knowledge, we just know about the 2 photographs that you should take and submit with the final report. So take oodles of photographs and keep the best 2, and you will submit that with your final report.
All right, that looks like all the questions here. There was a question earlier, just a reminder that this is being recorded and we will be posting this onto the Firelight Media YouTube channel.
Okay, so if you have any questions about the grant application, the grant process, please write to the City Artist Corps Grants email at NYFA. You see it in the chat, CAC Grants. And we've got a slide, cacgrants@nyfa.org. Email them ASAP before the cycle deadline for accommodations or assistance in applying. Questions about this webinar, email me, Michon Boston, at michon@firelightmedia.org. And if you have questions about the fabulous programs at Firelight Media and Black Public Media, please visit the websites and check it all out. Those are included in the chat. I want to thank everyone. Thank you, Cheryl, for joining me with the Q&A. Thank you, team behind the scenes of this Zoom webinar, Marcia, Leslie, and thank you all for joining us. Apply, apply, apply,
Apply, apply.
So be well, and thank you. Have a good week.
Bye, everyone.